My name is Elena Carter, 34 years old, and the forgotten eldest daughter of the Carter real estate empire. Arriving at our Manhattan penthouse for Christmas dinner, I noticed Dad obsessively checking his phone, whispering to Mom with unusual excitement. Little did they know, beneath my simple navy dress beat the heart of someone they had drastically underestimated. The bombshell Dad was about to drop at dinner would change our family forever, but not in the way he expected. If you're watching this from a family business situation, drop a comment below and subscribe to see how I turned my father's betrayal into the sweetest revenge that transformed our family dynasty forever. I grew up in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, in a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park with 12 rooms, a private elevator, and views that required a telescope to fully appreciate. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American dream. My grandfather, William Carter, started Carter Development in 1982 with nothing but a small construction loan and a revolutionary vision for luxury residential properties. He built it from a single Brooklyn brownstone renovation into a regional powerhouse before my father, Richard Carter, took over in 1998. Dad expanded the company aggressively. Under his leadership, Carter Development grew from a 25 million family business to a 150 million enterprise with over 400 employees and properties across 3 states. Every holiday dinner, every family vacation, every weekend gathering inevitably turned into a celebration of his business genius. The Carter name became synonymous with luxury real estate in New York circles, and Dad never let anyone forget it, especially his children. There were 3 of us Carter kids. My younger brother, Marcus, 31, was the golden child, despite never showing any real passion for construction or real estate. He majored in philosophy, partied through college, and still Dad handed him a senior partner position the day after graduation. Marcus spent more time at exclusive clubs or with his rotating cast of models than on construction sites, but somehow Dad remained convinced he was the natural heir to the Carter throne. Then there was me, Elena, perpetually overlooked at 34. Unlike my siblings, I inherited my grandfather's passion for architecture and development. I taught myself AutoCAD at 14 and designed my first small residential project at 17. I studied architecture and business at Columbia, graduated summa cum laude, and had legitimate innovative ideas for sustainable luxury development. Yet somehow Dad always looked right through me during business discussions as if I were invisible. My youngest sister Sarah, 28, rounded out our trio. She leveraged our family name to become a lifestyle blogger with millions of followers who loved her perfectly curated glimpses into Manhattan elite living. She had zero interest in construction or property development, but never missed an opportunity to post about being a Carter Development heiress, while contributing nothing to the company's success. Mom Victoria came from old New York money and approached family conflict the way all proper Upper East Side wives did, by ignoring it completely and ordering another martini. She played peacekeeper, but ultimately enabled Dad's worst behaviors, especially his dismissal of my architectural expertise. Richard, maybe you should listen to Elena's sustainable design ideas, she would occasionally suggest at dinner, only to immediately back down when Dad shot her that look. Victoria, please. This is actual business we're discussing, he would say before turning back to Marcus to continue their conversation about wine collections or private jets or whatever non-business topic they were actually discussing. Family gatherings always centered around development, talk that somehow excluded me. Dad and Marcus would dominate conversations with industry jargon and inside jokes while I sat silently, despite understanding green building technology and market trends better than either of them. If I tried to contribute, Dad would smile condescendingly and say something like, "That's sweet, Elena," but leave the real development discussions to the people who understand construction reality. The breaking point came when I was 24. Fresh out of Columbia with honors, I had developed a revolutionary, sustainable luxury concept that could have positioned Carter Development as the leader in eco-friendly high-end properties years before competitors entered that space. I spent months preparing comprehensive blueprints, environmental impact studies, and financial projections. Dad finally agreed to let me present during a board meeting, supposedly as a professional courtesy. I still remember walking into that marble, paneled boardroom, laptop and architectural models in hand, heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The board members, all men in their 50s and 60s who had been Dad's friends for decades, watched with polite but distant expressions as I set up my presentation materials. 15 minutes into my presentation, Dad checked his watch, sighed loudly, and raised his hand to stop me mid-sentence. "I think we've seen enough," he said with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Elena, sweetheart, this is all very creative, but completely impractical for a serious enterprise like ours. Our clients want luxury and prestige, not experimental green technologies." He turned to the board members with an apologetic shrug. "My daughter recently graduated college and is full of these academic environmental ideas. Now, shall we move on to actual development matters?" The humiliation burned through me as I packed up my materials, while they chuckled and moved on, as if I had never been there. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave New York and the family business behind. I would build something of my own, something so successful that even my father couldn't dismiss it. I moved to Austin, Texas with $8,000 in savings and nothing else. My parents assumed it was just a phase, a tantrum they indulged with patronizing amusement. "She'll be back when she runs out of money," I overheard Dad telling Mom on the phone during one of our increasingly rare calls. Those early years were brutal. My tiny studio apartment in East Austin cost nearly my entire monthly budget. I survived on takeout and coffee, working 90-hour weeks, first at entry-level architectural firms, then as a freelance sustainable design consultant. Every dollar I could save went into building my own company. I created Phoenix Holdings under the pseudonym E.C. Stone. The initials stood for Elena Carter, but nobody knew that. I wanted my success or failure to be completely disconnected from the Carter name. I started small, designing custom luxury homes for tech entrepreneurs, reinvesting every profit. By year 4, I had 15 employees and a real office in downtown Austin. The breakthrough came when I developed a proprietary, sustainable luxury building system that allowed for carbon-neutral construction without sacrificing high-end aesthetics, ironically similar to what I had pitched to my father years earlier. Private equity came calling, but I maintained majority ownership, determined to control my destiny. Over the next 8 years, I strategically acquired smaller green construction companies and sustainable technology firms. Phoenix Holdings grew to a $300 million valuation with projects in 6 states. Throughout it all, I maintained my pseudonym in all business dealings. In the real estate world, E.C. Stone was known as a brilliant, reclusive developer who rarely gave interviews or appeared at industry events. When I absolutely had to make public appearances, I used subtle changes to my appearance and let my VP of development do most of the talking. My family remained completely unaware of my success. During holiday calls and occasional visits, I kept conversations vague, describing my work as doing okay or still building my portfolio. Dad never pressed for details, as he had already written off my career as inconsequential. This suited me perfectly as I built Phoenix into something that would one day shock them all. What they didn't know was that for the past year, I had been strategically acquiring properties and development rights in key Manhattan locations. I studied Carter Development's expansion plans, identified their target acquisitions, and positioned Phoenix as the perfect competitor to outbid them on every major deal. 6 months ago, I had my CFO send an anonymous acquisition offer through a third party, which my father predictably rejected without proper consideration. Now, 10 years after being humiliated in that boardroom, I was returning home for Christmas with a plan that would change everything. Carter Development was struggling with outdated construction methods and losing market share to more innovative firms. My father didn't know it yet, but I was about to become his worst nightmare and his only salvation. The week before Christmas, I was in my corner office overlooking Lady Bird Lake, finalizing the paperwork for what would be the most important deal of my life. My assistant knocked and entered with my travel itinerary. "Your private jet is confirmed for Tuesday at 2 p.m., she said, placing the folder on my desk. "Are you sure you don't want to bring your executive team to New York for the announcement?" I shook my head. "This is personal. I need to handle it alone." After she left, my phone rang. It was Isabella, my best friend since those early struggling days when we shared a wall in adjacent studio apartments in Austin. "Are you really going through with this family Christmas charade?" she asked without preamble. "After everything they did. After 2 years of barely speaking to them." I sighed, spinning in my chair to face the window. "I have to be there in person when it happens, Izzy. I need to see his face. I remember the last Christmas disaster," she said carefully. "Your father announced Marcus's promotion to executive vice president while you sat there with your unacknowledged series, a funding round. You came back to Austin and didn't speak to them for months." The memory stung. Dad had raised a toast to the future of Carter Development while looking directly at my brother, who had been too hungover to contribute anything meaningful to the strategy meeting earlier that day. "This time will be different," I promised. "Everything changes this Christmas." I spent the evening packing, deliberately choosing my wardrobe to make a statement. Gone were the casual clothes my family associated with me. Instead, I packed Tom Ford suits, a Oscar de la Renta dress for Christmas dinner, Christian Louboutin heels, and the subtle signifiers of success that only the wealthy recognize, a Patek Philippe watch, a Hermes handbag, diamond earrings from Harry Winston. None of it ostentatious, all of it unmistakably expensive. After years of deliberately downplaying my success around my family, I wanted them to see glimpses of it before the final revelation. Tuesday afternoon, I boarded the private jet I rarely used, preferring commercial flights despite my wealth. This trip warranted the exception. During the 4-hour flight, I reviewed the contracts once more, ensuring every detail was perfect. The irony wasn't lost on me that for years I had flown coach to New York, eating airplane pretzels and squeezing into middle seats while building the empire that would now allow me to arrive in style. The jet landed at Teterboro Airport. A black Mercedes S-Class waited on the tarmac, another unusual indulgence I had arranged specifically for this trip. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods toward Manhattan, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and determination hardening within me. The Carter family penthouse looked exactly as it always had: imposing glass walls, perfectly curated modern art, panoramic city views that reminded visitors of the family's elevated status. A Christmas tree that rivaled Rockefeller Center's dominated the living room, decorated with ornaments that probably cost more than most people's cars. I instructed the driver to wait, then took a deep breath before entering the private elevator I had ridden thousands of times before. Mom answered the door herself, bypassing the housekeeper in her eagerness to see me. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in my appearance. "Elena, darling," she said, embracing me with the scent of expensive perfume and the faint note of afternoon champagne on her breath. "You look different. Is that a Patek?" "Actually, yes," I said, returning her hug. "Good to see you, Mom." She ushered me inside, chattering about Christmas preparations and Sarah's latest brand partnership milestone. I nodded politely, setting down my luggage in the grand foyer, with its sweeping city views and contemporary art installations. "Your father is in his study," Mom said. "He's been very busy with some big deal, very hush-hush, even with me," I smiled. "I'll say hello before I settle in." Dad's study had always been his sanctuary, a minimalist space of steel, glass, and architectural awards. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response, a small act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his usual mild interest. "Elena, you made it?" He stood for a brief, awkward hug, then gestured vaguely toward the chair across from his desk. "The flight from Texas went well. Very smooth," I said, deliberately not taking the offered seat. "I flew private. More efficient." A momentary confusion crossed his features. "Private? That must have been expensive." I shrugged. "Business is good." Before he could inquire further, his phone rang, and with a perfunctory, "Excuse me. This is important." He turned away to answer it. I used the opportunity to glance at the papers on his desk. There it was, the Phoenix Holdings acquisition proposal with my company logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I maintained my composure as he finished his call. "Sorry about that," he said, hastily gathering the papers into a folder. "Big things happening at the company. You wouldn't understand the complexities." The familiar dismissal rolled off me like water now. "Of course, Dad. I'll let you get back to it." I left his study and headed to my old bedroom, which Mom had maintained as a shrine to my teenage self. Architecture awards, drafting tools, and Columbia pennants still adorned the walls. Dusty testaments to achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. After freshening up, I headed to the living room and found Marcus already drinking scotch at 400 in the afternoon. He had our father's tall frame and confident posture, but years of privileged indulgence had softened him around the middle. "Well, well, the prodigal sister returns," he said, raising his glass in mock toast. "Still playing with blueprints in Texas?" "Something like that," I replied with a tight smile. "How's your little architecture practice doing? Making any money yet?" His condescension was so familiar, it almost felt like home. Before I could answer, Sarah burst into the room, phone held at the perfect angle to capture her entrance for her Instagram followers. "Elena's here, everyone! Family reunion time," she announced to her phone before air, kissing my cheeks. "You look expensive, sis. Did you finally land a celebrity client?" "No, just working hard," I said, stepping out of her camera frame. Marcus brought his new girlfriend. Sarah Stage whispered, still recording. "Tiffany, she's 25 and models for luxury brands." On cue, a statuesque brunette entered the room wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that highlighted her perfect figure. Marcus immediately pulled her to his side with proprietary pride. "Tiffany, this is my sister Elena. She lives in Austin and does architecture stuff." His vague wave dismissed a decade of my professional accomplishments. "Oh my God, I love Austin," Tiffany gushed. "The music scene is amazing." Our awkward small talk was interrupted by the sound of Dad's raised voice from his study. Though the words were muffled, His excited tone carried through the penthouse. Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow after Christmas. 75 million is the final offer. Phoenix Holdings has been very insistent on the timeline. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. The household staff had always been kinder to me than my own family. Maria, our housekeeper of 15 years, was arranging appetizers for the evening. Miss Elena, she smiled warmly. It's good to see you. You look well. Texas agrees with you. Thanks, Maria. Need any help? She shook her head. Your mother wants everything perfect for tomorrow. Big day, she says. Your father has news. I nodded, wondering if the entire household staff knew about the sale before his own children did. So I gathered. The pre-dinner cocktail hour was excruciating. Mom fluttered about with forced cheerfulness. Dad checked his phone every 2 minutes. Marcus bragged about his new Porsche to anyone who would listen. And Sarah documented everything for her followers. I sipped my wine slowly, observing the family dynamics with new eyes. No longer the hurt daughter seeking validation, but a successful businesswoman about to change the game entirely. Dinner is ready, Mom finally announced, ushering us toward the formal dining room where the family had gathered for holiday meals for 2 decades. I took a deep breath and followed them, knowing that by the time dessert was served, nothing would ever be the same. The Carter family Christmas dinner had always been a formal affair. The massive glass dining table gleamed under designer pendant lighting, set with baccarat crystal that only emerged for special occasions. Sterling silver candlesticks held white tapered candles, casting elegant shadows over the minimalist holiday centerpiece that Mom had undoubtedly commissioned from New York's most exclusive florist. I noted with mild amusement that I had been seated at the far end of the table, as far from Dad at the head as physically possible. Typical. Marcus sat at Dad's right hand with Tiffany beside him, while Sarah occupied the spot to Dad's left. Mom took her traditional place at the opposite end with me beside her, symbolically separated from the inner circle of family business by the length of polished glass between us. The household staff brought out course after course, truffle soup garnished with crème fraîche, winter salad with pomegranate and pecans, and finally the prime rib, perfectly cooked and accompanied by all the traditional sides. Dad carved with ceremonial precision while Sarah filmed for her social media, providing running commentary. And here's Daddy carving the roast, just like his father before him, continuing the Carter family tradition of excellence in everything they do. I caught Mom wincing slightly at Sarah's performance before taking a large sip of her martini. By my count, it was her third since I'd arrived. Once our plates were filled, Dad raised his glass for the traditional Carter family gratitude ritual. Another performance where we each shared what we were thankful for this year. It had once been meaningful before it devolved into a competitive status report. Marcus went first, as tradition dictated. I'm thankful for another record-breaking year at Carter Development, he began, though I knew from my research that the company had actually lost 2 major contracts this quarter. And for my new partnership with the Tribeca Luxury Project, he squeezed Tiffany's hand. And for new beginnings with this amazing woman. Tiffany giggled and kissed his cheek, while Sarah made exaggerated gagging motions when Marcus wasn't looking. Sarah went next, phone still in hand. I'm so thankful to have reached 5 million followers this year! My collaboration with Luxury Living magazine has been amazing, and I'm grateful to be a Carter and represent our family brand to the world. She beamed at Dad, who nodded approvingly. When my turn came, I set down my fork and spoke clearly. I'm thankful for the lessons life has taught me. That sometimes rejection leads to the right path. That persistence matters more than privilege, and that success comes to those who build it themselves. I raised my glass. To finding your own way. Dad frowned slightly, perhaps detecting something in my tone, but quickly moved on to his own gratitude speech, which predictably centered on the business legacy he had built. Mom offered generic thanks for family and health, her words slightly slurred. Throughout the meal, Dad seemed distracted, checking his phone under the table and occasionally whispering to Mom, whose smile grew increasingly strained. Marcus dominated the conversation with stories about clients he had supposedly impressed, while Sarah interrupted regularly to share comments from her followers, watching her Christmas Instagram story. As the staff brought in the chocolate tart and tiramisu, Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal wine glass, the sharp ping cutting through the dinner conversation. "I have an announcement to make," he said, standing at the head of the table, with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "One that affects everyone here." The table fell silent. Even Sarah lowered her phone. "As you know, I've dedicated my life to building Carter Development into a leader in our industry. But all good things evolve, and the time has come for change." He paused dramatically. "I have decided to sell the company." Marcus choked on his wine. "What, Dad? You can't be serious." Dad raised his hand for silence. "I've been in negotiations for months with a very interested buyer. The deal will be finalized tomorrow." Sarah gasped theatrically. "But Daddy, what about the Carter legacy?" "My brand is built around being a Carter Development heiress. That brings me to the second part of my announcement." Dad continued, his expression unreadable. "The proceeds from the sale will not be going to you children as inheritance." Now both Marcus and Sarah erupted in protest. "That's our birthright!" Marcus slammed his fist on the table, rattling the crystal. "You promised the company would be mine!" "What do you mean?" Sarah wailed, now live streaming the family drama to her followers. "Where is the money going?" Dad waited for their outbursts to subside. "Your mother and I will be using part of it for our retirement. The rest will go to establishing the Carter Foundation, a charitable organization to support sustainable architecture education." Marcus stood, his face flushed with anger. "I've given 8 years to this company. You promised it would be mine someday." Sarah joined in, tears streaming down her face, though she kept her phone carefully angled to capture her most flattering crying angle. Throughout the chaos, I remained perfectly still, taking small, deliberate bites of chocolate tart. Mom noticed my calm and gave me a quizzical look. "Elena," she said quietly, "you don't seem surprised." The table gradually quieted as everyone turned toward me, suddenly remembering my presence. "Actually," I said, setting down my dessert fork with precision, "I have just one question." I looked directly at my father. "Who is the buyer?" Dad's chest puffed with pride, pleased to have important information that we didn't. "A very successful sustainable development firm called Phoenix Holdings. They're paying $75 million, which is more than generous given our recent market challenges." I took a sip of water, using the moment to steady myself for what came next. The room felt charged with strange electricity, the moment suspended between past and future. "Dad," I said finally, my voice calm and clear, "I am Phoenix Holdings." The room went completely silent. I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway, marking the seconds of frozen disbelief. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. The silence was absolute, as if the air itself had solidified around us. I watched the emotions play across my father's face in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally the first flickers of anger. Marcus was the first to react, knocking over his wine glass as he stood abruptly. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood, a vivid punctuation to the moment. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded, looking between Dad and me with growing panic. Sarah, incredibly, was still live streaming, her hands shaking as she captured what was quickly becoming the most dramatic content her followers had ever seen. "Oh my God," she whispered to her phone. "Did my sister just say she owns Phoenix Holdings? The company buying our family business?" Mom reached for her martini glass, found it empty, and promptly grabbed the bottle instead. I stood slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm after carrying this secret for so long. "E.C. Stone," I said. "Elena Carter Stone. That's the name I've been using professionally for the past decade, while building Phoenix Holdings into a $300 million company." Dad found his voice at last. "This is preposterous," he sputtered. "Phoenix Holdings is run by E.C. Stone, a respected sustainable developer, not by my daughter who's been playing at architecture in Texas." I reached into my purse and removed my business card case, made of sleek titanium, with the Phoenix Holdings logo laser engraved on its surface. I slid a card across the table toward him. "Actually, Dad, I am E.C. Stone. I founded Phoenix Holdings 10 years ago, after you dismissed my sustainable development proposal and humiliated me in front of your board." Dad snatched up the card, staring at it as if it might transform in his hands. "This is some kind of joke," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Phoenix Holdings now owns controlling interests in Green Tech Construction, Sustainable Materials Inc., and Ecolux Development," I continued, naming Carter Development's 3 largest suppliers. "We also recently acquired majority stakes in your 2 biggest clients, Manhattan Luxury Properties and Prestige Residential Group. The Carter Development acquisition is the final piece in a strategic plan I've been implementing for the past 2 years." "You've been spying on our business," Marcus accused, his face mottled with rage. "That's corporate espionage." "No, Marcus. It's called market research. Everything I learned about Carter Development came from publicly available financial reports, industry analysis, and completely legal channels." I turned back to Dad. "The truth is, Carter Development has been failing for years. Your construction methods are outdated, your sustainability practices are non-existent, and you've lost 30% market share in the past 3 years." "How dare you?" Dad began, but I cut him off. "I tried to help you first. 6 months ago, Phoenix Holdings sent an anonymous partnership proposal that would have allowed the Carter name to remain on the company while providing the capital and technology upgrades you desperately needed. You rejected it without even reading past the cover letter." Dad's eyes widened in recognition. "The Green Future proposal. That was you." I nodded. "I wanted to give you a chance to accept help without knowing it came from me. Your pride wouldn't allow it. So this whole time you've been plotting against your own family," Marcus shouted, "planning to steal our company." "Not steal, Marcus. Purchase legally for $75 million, which is honestly more than its current market value." I kept my voice level despite the emotional storm brewing inside me. "And, let's be clear, this company stopped being our family business the day made it evident that only one child would ever have a meaningful role in it. Despite that child's complete lack of qualifications or interest in sustainable development." Sarah finally lowered her phone, the reality of the situation apparently sinking in. "So you're going to be our boss now?" she asked in a small voice. "Technically, yes," I confirmed, "though the current management structure will be completely reorganized." Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "This deal is off," he declared. "I won't sell my company to my own daughter as some kind of revenge plot. I shook my head slowly. The contracts are signed, Dad. The board approved the sale unanimously. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Legally, Phoenix Holdings already owns Carter Development. I'll fight this, he threatened. Though the uncertainty in his eyes told me he already knew I had outmaneuvered him. My lawyers will. Your lawyers have already vetted the deal extensively. I interrupted gently. They advised you it was the best offer you'd get in the current market. What exactly will you tell them now? That you're upset because the brilliant CEO you've been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter. Mom spoke for the first time since my revelation, her words slightly slurred but her gaze surprisingly clear. All these years, Elena. All these years you were building this while you thought I was failing. I finished for her. Yes? Exactly. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You have a choice to make right now, Elena. You can be my daughter, or you can be the person who took my company. You can't be both. The ultimatum hung in the air between us, so predictable it almost made me sad. 10 years ago, it would have devastated me. Now it merely confirmed what I had always known. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said quietly. I am both. I always have been. You just refuse to see it. Sarah had started crying in earnest now, mascara tracking down her perfectly contoured cheeks. What happens to us? To our trust funds? That depends. I answered honestly. On whether you want to actually work for the company or just claim its benefits. Marcus pointed an accusing finger at me. You planned this for Christmas deliberately, didn't you? To humiliate us in front of the whole family? I planned it for Christmas because I knew everyone would be here. I corrected him. And because 10 years ago at Christmas dinner, Dad announced that he was promoting you to senior partner, despite your complete lack of qualifications, while telling me my degree from Columbia and my sustainable design expertise wasn't enough to warrant even considering my proposals. Dad's face flushed at the reminder. That was different. Marcus is my son, my heir, and there it is, I said softly. The real reason I was never given a chance. Not my ideas, not my education, not my work ethic, just my gender. The painful truth silenced the room again. Even Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. This conversation is over, Dad finally declared. Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys. He stormed from the dining room, the sound of his study door slamming echoing through the penthouse moments later. Mom rose unsteadily to her feet. I should go check on him, she murmured, though she paused beside my chair. Are you really worth $300 million? I nodded. And all those times you couldn't come home for holidays because you said you couldn't afford the flight. I was running a company, Mom, and I needed you all to keep underestimating me. She touched my shoulder briefly, an unreadable expression on her face, then followed after Dad. As the dining room emptied, I remained seated, looking at the abandoned Christmas feast around me. The prime rib had grown cold, the candles burned low, and the family I had once desperately wanted to impress had scattered in shock and anger. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a hollow ache spread through my chest as I realized that while I had finally earned their attention, I was further than ever from earning their understanding. I retreated to my childhood bedroom as the penthouse descended into chaos below. Through the floor, I could hear Dad shouting on the phone, presumably to his lawyers, while Mom's placating tones rose and fell in counterpoint. Occasionally, Marcus's angry voice would join the cacophony, followed by Sarah's dramatic wailing. My old room remained frozen in time, a museum to the person I had been. The double bed with its white minimalist comforter, the drafting table, where I had spent countless hours designing and dreaming. The bookshelves lined with architecture books, and the few novels I had allowed myself as rare indulgences. Awards and certificates gathered dust on the shelves, achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. I ran my fingers along the spines of my old sketchbooks, pulling one out at random. Inside were detailed building plans, structural sketches, and notes for the very sustainable luxury concept that had eventually become Phoenix's signature approach. The irony wasn't lost on me, that everything I had built had begun right here in the room, where I had felt most invisible. A sharp knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Marcus, his tie loosened and face flushed with either anger or alcohol, possibly both. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the room without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "About what, Marcus? How I ruined your Christmas? Or how you plan to inherit a company you helped run into the ground?" "You think you're so clever," he hissed, pacing the small space like a caged animal. "Little Elena with her blueprints and her secret identity. Did you enjoy lying to our faces all these years? About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas." I replied evenly. "Remember when I suggested Carter Development should focus on LEED, certified luxury properties, 4 years ago during Easter dinner? Dad dismissed it as environmental nonsense, but somehow 6 months later, you presented the exact same concept as your own strategic vision." Marcus stopped pacing, his expression darkening. "I was the one who stayed. I was the one who put in time at the company while you ran off to Texas to prove some point." "You put in time, yes, but what did you actually contribute, Marcus? Besides expenses on the company card for client entertainment at strip clubs and a corner office you used primarily for Instagram posts between hangovers." His face contorted with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. I brought in the Tribeca project. Tribeca came to Carter Development because I personally reached out to their lead architect as E.C. Stone and recommended your services as part of my long-term acquisition strategy," I informed him. "And I know exactly what I'm talking about because I've been auditing the company remotely for the past year, as part of my due diligence, including the financial records you thought were only accessible on the local server." The color drained from his face. "What are you saying? I know about the $400,000 you've embezzled through fake consulting fees, Marcus. I know about the phantom contractor payments that went directly to your personal accounts. I know everything." He took a threatening step toward me. "You can't prove any of that. I have transaction records, account numbers, and digital signatures showing the falsified entries came from your office computer on days when only you had access to the system." I held his gaze steadily. "I'm not planning to pursue criminal charges, Marcus. That would hurt the company during the transition. But don't test me, you," he whispered, hands clenching into fists at his sides. "You would destroy your own brother. I would hold accountable a thief who happens to be related to me." I corrected him. "There's a difference." We stood in tense silence until he finally turned away. "This isn't over," he warned, yanking open the door. "Actually, it is," I said to his retreating back. "You just don't realize it yet." I had barely closed the door when another knock came. This time it was Sarah, her makeup freshly touched up despite the tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. "So you're like a secret billionaire," she said without preamble, entering my room and immediately sitting on my bed. "That's actually kind of incredible." I couldn't help but laugh at her rapid pivot. "Is that what you're going with? 5 minutes ago you were crying about losing your Harris status." She shrugged, examining her manicure. I'm adaptable. It's essential for influencer longevity. She looked up with sudden calculation in her eyes. Just think of the content we could create together. My sister, the tech mogul. My followers would be obsessed. Is that why you're here, Sarah? To propose a business collaboration? More like a mutual arrangement, she said, smoothing her dress. You need a media presence for your company that humanizes you. And I need an authentic connection to actual business success instead of just looking pretty with products. The nakedly transactional nature of her proposal was so typically Sarah that I almost admired it. And what about actually working for the company? Learning about sustainable development, contributing something beyond your Instagram aesthetic? She wrinkled her nose. God, no. Architecture is boring and construction meetings make me want to die. But I could be like the brand ambassador, the face of the company for the lifestyle market. The face of a sustainable luxury development firm for the lifestyle market. I repeated slowly. Do you hear yourself? Sarah stood, straightening her shoulders. Fine, mock me like everyone else in this family. But my social media skills are actually valuable in today's market, whether you respect them or not. I've built my own brand from nothing, just like you did. The parallel had never occurred to me before, and I found myself momentarily speechless. There was a strange kind of truth to it, though our methods and values diverged dramatically. I'll think about it, I said finally. But not tonight. She nodded, apparently satisfied with even this small concession. Just so you know, I've already posted about a major family business development without specifics. My engagement is through the roof. After she left, I sat at my old drafting table, powering up my laptop to check on the final details for tomorrow's announcement. A gentle knock interrupted me again.